It is Friday, January 15th, 2021, 9 o'clock in the morning. The Kerr County Commissioners Court is now in session for a special court meeting. We have a quorum present. We'll have the other commissioners here hopefully later in the morning. We have one item scheduled at 9 o'clock and then another timed item at 9:30. And so at this time, I always ask, is there any public input? Well, there being none, then what we will do is move on to the first item on the agenda, which is to consider, discuss, and take appropriate action for the court to set a public hearing for 10 a.m. on February 12, 2021 for the creation of an Emergency Service District Number 3. This is Commissioner Harris and our Tax Assessor Collector, Bob Reeves.
Yes, I've asked Bob to come in. We're actually going to end up passing on this, but Bob's got an explanation why.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen. As Commissioner Harris stated, we will need to pass. The petition was not filed as we anticipated, and therefore, because of timing, it will not be able to be on the May 1st ballot, and we will return to court once the petition is filed, and we can discuss it for the November ballot.
Okay, simple as that.
And just so the public understands before you get away, in order to establish an emergency services district, there is a vote required of the district itself. Is that correct?
That is correct. It first is the petition process, Your Honor.
Well, I understand, but so I'm backing into it. So we back into these things, trying to explain to the public. If we're going to put it on the ballot, there are certain things, prerequisites that have to be satisfied before we can put it on the ballot.
That is correct.
And so what we were trying to do was to get this on the May 1 ballot, but all the prerequisites have to be done in order for us to be able to do that.
That's correct.
And so we're running a little late on those prerequisites, which kicks us over to the November ballot problem.
That is right. There's a 78-day buffer that you have to call the election. This particular type of petition requires a public hearing before the 78th day, which would be February 12th.
Right.
You need 21 days advance notice for publication before the hearing. And with those time frames, it is not possible to have it on the May 1st ballot.
I understand, and for the public, sometimes these dates that we set and why we're doing it, it seems a little mysterious, and I was just trying to give them an explanation that this is something that everybody wants to do. We just have to wait to be able to do it in the prescribed time required by law.
That is correct, and
Thank you,
it's not Kerr County's time frame. It's what's spelled out in the Health and Safety Code.
It's the state of Texas.
That is correct. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
That item will be passed. We have a time. We don't have anything else on the agenda except a time item at 9:30. So the court will stand in recess until 9:30, and we will reconvene. Okay, it is 9:30, and Commissioners Court is now back in session. We started this morning at 9 o'clock. This is a timed item. We have limited time this morning. I want to advise everybody that we're going to try to wrap this up by 11. I have to be somewhere, so we're trying to move through this pretty quickly. The next item on the agenda is 1.2, which is consider, discuss, and take appropriate action regarding a concept plan for Eden Farm, a residential development in Centerville. Mr. Moser.
Thank you, Judge. Eden Farms is a proposed project of which our purpose today is to look at the concept and hopefully approve the concept for this development. We're going to go quite extensively through here. It's the reason we want to have it as a special session, since it's going to take probably less than an hour to do it, but it's going to take some time with all the questions and stuff that's in there. But a little bit of background. Charlie Hastings and myself met with the developer of this over the last several months. And then after that, we began to get into the details. And we've had 2 meetings on this project that lasted well over an hour each one of them. But in those meetings, what we had is everybody that could be involved, should be involved in this project was there. We had the developer, which I'll introduce in a minute. We had the developer's engineer, Mike Welburn, Charlie Hastings, the subdivision and floodplain administrator. We've had Aqua Texas, who would be the water provider for here. We've had WCID, Water Control Improvement District, from Kendall County participating. We had the superintendent of schools of Center Point participating. The Headwaters Groundwater, Gene Williams has been there. So this has been discussed and cussed, and what we did, as we looked at it, we could see a number of problems. We think that there's a solution to each one of these issues, sort of with the attitude that every problem's got a solution. I think we found solutions here. So the purpose today is to go through this proposed development and look at it in detail. And bottom line is the biggest concern from everything we've seen, there's some other sub-issues in there. Biggest concern is the water availability. We think we've got a good solution to that. And the way the thing's being proposed is a condominium project, and Brandon will discuss that more. But Brandon Namkin is the project developer. I think Jonathan's got something. So Jonathan and I both have been in all these meetings where we've reviewed this project.
Just a couple of comments, going back to our subdivision rules. A lot of what we're going to talk about today, or Brandon's going to talk about, will appear to be a little bit contrary to our subdivision rules, or different, or looking at them differently. And the challenge that we've had, and this is something that we've been working on, Charlie and I have been working on for the last 2 years on rewriting our subdivision rules. As I think the court's aware, we've had workshops on it. Our current rules do not allow for a city-type development. We just don't talk about it. I mean, we leave it off. And the reason we were never able to do a city-type development because we didn't have wastewater when the rules were written. Now we do. So this is a kind of almost like a workshop as to the direction that we're going to have to go, in my opinion anyway, for this type of development, because we will have more of them come in, more than likely down the road. And we need to keep our rules in place where it makes sense, but make some modifications where that makes sense also. And a lot of the things that are being looked at here, they're different than we currently require, but they make sense because our current rules don't allow for this, for high density development. They just don't do it right now. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there, that this is, some of the things that are asking and we're talking about are consistent, and this can be done without any waivers. but it is different.
And I'd add one thing to it is we look at this and we look at the surrounding, we do have some high density development in the area, and it's right adjacent to this property, as a matter of fact, in Center Point. There's some really high density stuff there. Not to be discussed in any detail now, but there's over the horizon, there's a potential for hundreds of additional jobs in this part of the county, in the east part of the county, that could come to fruition. And if they do, what does everybody say? Workforce development and housing is what's needed. So I think Jonathan hit the nail right on the head. We're doing something a little bit different here. So hopefully we can peel this onion. Okay. Got something, Charlie? Yeah.
Just when you're ready, I can introduce and then we'll turn it over
Sure.
to the developer's engineer.
Okay.
Okay. The owner developer is Brandon Namkin. This is a proposed total acreage of this subdivision is 149.5 acres. The number of lots that they're looking at are 293, but it's divided between single family and RV lots. So this concept plan proposes to subdivide that 149.5 acres in Center Point into 293 lots. 166 would be single family residential lots, and 127 would be RV lots. The maximum number of allowable residential lots will be determined using the Texas Water Development Board's model subdivision rules as it relates to water availability. The property owner is also requesting the court allow lots to have less than 150 to 200 feet of road frontage. Section 7.04, access to roads of the Kerr County Subdivision Rules and Regulations, requires 150 feet of frontage on a local road and 200 feet of frontage on a collector. But it also states that the minimum lot frontage distances may be reviewed by the Commissioner's Court, and lesser distances may be approved based on lot density, topography, and other mitigating factors recommended by the County Subdivision Administrator. Subdivisions within a high-density development area and where the above minimum lot frontage distances are not practical will be considered on a case-by-case basis. So there are provisions in our regulations to allow for lot frontage to be less. With that being said, I will turn this over to Mike Wellborn of Wellborn Engineering, who is the developer's engineer.
Mr. Welder? Oh,
I'm going to start if that's
Yeah, go
okay.
ahead.
My name's Brandon Ampkin. I'm representing Eden Farms as the developer. As you can see, you have concept plans for nine. You can see them up on the monitor. Obviously, there's probably not a reason to really harp on the need for workforce housing. I think that's everybody pretty much knows there's a need here for that. What we've decided to do is try to get density into the county, and we looked at this from different aspects with current development standards, what we're looking for as far as density to get price points to where we need it, and this is kind of how we've our plan of attack so far. We're going to go to the next.
Brandon, give a little bit of background on the company and what you guys have done.
So I've joined forces with the entity Eden Farms, and we're developing all over the state of Texas, and we're actually doing this actual type of development to provide workforce type housing in communities where you have a top end real estate market and not much of a middle to low end market. So I've done developments in Green. We're doing them in Buda. We're looking in College Station to do stuff. We're doing some in north of Waco. We're actually in Brownwood, and we are wanting to be here in Kerrville, in the Kerr County area. So when we looked around, we looked at properties. Obviously you guys probably know that the main reasons why you struggle with development are several reasons. Topography is one, water and sewer is another. So when we started going through all of this, it'll kind of I'm going to start painting this picture of why we ended up trying to go to the condo regime versus just a traditional flat. And if you go to the second page here, gives you more of an aerial of our subdivision, the parameter, the general lot layouts. within the boundaries. And then I'm gonna refer in a little bit to Aqua Center Point North Water Station. That is, it's highlighted in blue there. That is the CCN that we'll be connecting water, looping our water system with. You can go to the next slide. So the subdivision in Center Point, there's development opportunity there. There's obviously, because there's a need of workforce housing. There was 150 acres that was suitable for this type of development for several reasons. Utilities were close by. We still need to extend to get them, water and sewer. The topography is suitable for us to develop a density, a higher density subdivision. And based on the product that our approach, we think this is an economically feasible development that we can put our hands around and get together. The development challenges are obviously price points for properties. So that's a big one, to try to make sure that we stay in the workforce housing market, and we're trying to adhere to, you can go back to the City of Kerrville, I think it's the 2050 comprehensive plan that delineates a lot of details in there on what workforce housing actually is. And, you know, we are trying to provide housing from anywhere between 200 and to 300,000. And we feel like that's a market that is lacking here in this area. And so that's one of the challenges. The next couple challenges, obviously, that Commissioner Mosier touched on was water. Water is a big one we have to tackle. Typically, if you know, when I'm looking at land to develop, if water's not available, you just really can't develop. You can manufacture different ways to have sewer, but if water's not there, you can't move forward. Both of those are in close proximity, so we feel like that's attainable. But they are challenged. They come with challenges that we have to overcome and design for and account for. The last development challenge that we've come across is the county's current development standards, which that was kind of led off with this. You know, I think we have a plan for it. Again, it'll look a little different based on how we're going to package it, and our approach. Because how we're going to package it, our approach is going to be a condo regime, and I'm going to kind of lay into there now with the three things that why we're choosing to do a condominium regime are subdivision requirement deviations.
Next chart.
Water uses and sewer control, and development substantiation. So I'm going to touch on this slide. We're going to focus on the subdivision requirement deviations. The first one is the right-of-way. We're based on our density. We have over 120 lots, which then triggers our right-of-way into the subdivision to be a collector street, and arterial. It's going to be classified as an arterial based on the density of our subdivision, which means that it's 24 foot wide of pavement, 28 foot of base, but it's a 90 foot right of way. What we have on the ground, what we are allowed to do based off of some restrictions we have, is a power line, and we have 60 feet. So that is one of the deviations we were going to have to ask for a waiver for, that we feel like we can roll up into this condominium regime. I think in many discussions, the 90 foot right of way is a bit excessive. I think if you're going to do higher density subdivisions, you're going to have to relook at those right of way widths. You know, especially when you're trying to get a higher density, that's the biggest issue. So we would be asking for a 60 foot right of way. The second is the lot frontage width. As Charlie mentioned, it's required for 200 foot on arterial roadways. Our design allow for 75 foot. We feel like we can mitigate some of those issues that come with a 75 foot. The biggest issue is in the county, you typically don't do curb and gutter, you do bar ditches and culverts. So I understand the premise of why you do larger lot frontages, but we feel like we can mitigate a lot of that by doing shared driveways, reducing the amount of culverts, that on our lots. So we feel like we have a plan intact that can mitigate any of those issues potentially for drainage purposes specifically. Lot sizes, this is where we're going to start getting into some details here. Lot sizes, the minimum lot size in the county is a 1/4 acre. Most of our lots, in our design, are between a 1/4 acre and a 1/2 acre. Well, that fits well, but, and I'm gonna also touch just a little bit on the RV size, since you typically, right now, you have no size requirements. But when we go down to the density is where the lot sizes come from. So you take our 150 acres, and I'm rounding up to 150 acres. The current standard for the county is that you have to take the acreage and divide it by 2, which gives us 75 lots. Obviously, that does not, it doesn't pencil out from a developer standpoint to do 75 lots on this development with the cost of the sewer, attaching the sewer and the water and all of the detention wells and stuff like that has to go on there for the water. So we can do the 1/4 acre and 1/2 acre lots, which meets the lot minimums, but it gets into the 75 lots is allowable in the current regulations for the density. So obviously our design has 166 single family residential lots and 127 RV lots. And I'm gonna touch on that a little bit with why we've started doing the RV lot investigation a little bit more over the last 6 to 8 months in other areas. I think over this last year, you've seen a lot of, I'm gonna use the transient type workforce where you have people living in motorhomes and working in certain areas, and this has actually been a much more popular real estate transaction as people living in RVs, and so we're looking at it as a possible to where you can buy an RV lot, and it'll be another layer of affordability within the subdivision that you can live in this area. Green space is always a hot topic. How much green space within common area? Well, out of our 150 acres right now, we have 66.63 acres of green space. That's 44% of our property is green space, common areas, drainage for the neighborhood. If you go to the next page, I'm going to start on the water usage. So this is going to probably be I would say this is taking up most of our time talking is the water. And it's not that we understand that there's an issue. We just feel like we needed to be able to prove up our case. So I'm going to go with water usage and sewer control for the second item, and Aqua and us as the developer to control the water usage. Water and sewer owned and maintained by Aqua within our condominium regime. The first bullet item, our development plan's density is predicated on 144 gallons a day for single family residential, and we've calculated for 45 gallons per day for RV sites. Kerr County does not have a standard requirement other than 2 acres of density requirement. Headwaters, it will provide 80,000 gallons per acre per year, and the max water usage is 438 gallons per year per lot. So what we've done to substantiate our calculations is we requested from Aqua to pull CCN data from, they gave us for 12 different water systems, which is over 1,200 connections, and that averages out over 158 gallons per day. In those systems, you'll obviously have water loss from occasional leaks on older systems, and a lot of the homes in there are built are older and not as efficient housing with plumbing fixtures. So you're going to have some extra loss there that's calculated in there, and it's hard to quantify what that value is. This includes the Center Point North CCN of 91 units, and that was shown on that second slide where that little shaded blue area is, just to kind of give you all a reference of location. We hired an environmental consultant out of Dallas that actually took a look at some of our plans that we are planning on putting in here, and they came back with 134 gallons a day for 3 people. KCWCID stated in our last meeting that their average connection usage was 145 gallons a day. And then you couple that with that our development is going to instill rainwater harvesting and catchment for all of irrigation and xeriscaping on all our new houses. So we feel like we can mitigate any of the averages, and we feel like we can even get below what we're predicting to be using on an average per single family.
And how do you do that?
How would we do that? Well, I was going to get to that here in a little bit. Part of the new construction of the houses, using more water savings appliances within it, the new development. And that's my next page, I'll start getting into how we're going to do that. It's going to be, new construction. I'll just go ahead and flip. You can go to the new.
Brandon, before you go there,
Yeah.
I know you read it right off the slide, but the slide had a typo. I noticed 438 gallons per day per lot. And I know that
Oh,
the slide
per day,
said
sorry,
year,
per day.
and it is per
Yeah.
day. I know that minutes are being taken over there, so I just wanted
Okay,
that.
sorry about that.
I was trying to figure that out.
Sorry about that, guys. Yes, it is per day per lot. So if you can go to the next slide, I'll start getting into how. To continue with the water usage and sewer control, the aqua water system improvements, the new construction with better pipe material, fittings, embedment, backfill, which reduces leaks and breaks. New water lines that go in are continuous solid PEX lines instead of a bunch of fittings and joints that tend to erode, and I think Joseph could kind of hit on that at another point if somebody has a specific question about that. Our new water system will also be looped into their existing water system in the Centerpoint North system, which will eliminate a lot of the dead-end pipes where you have to flush them. So there's a lot of loss there as well. And then new meters. When you install new meters, you actually are able to, most of the water losses that we have found and we've heard, that most of the water loss is actually at the meter. So when you have to put new meters in, you actually are starting to resolve some of that issue as well. Aqua water and sewer system. Aqua will own and manage the sewer system.
You mentioned tankless hot water?
I'm going to get to that in my
Okay, sorry.
development part.
Okay, sorry.
Yep. Aqua will own and manage the sewer system that will connect to WCID sewer extension there in Centerpoint. And that is, through this condo regime, is the only way we're allowed for them to be able to do that. Aqua will own and manage the water system. And I think from a county standpoint, this is big. Aqua will maintain both the water and sewer systems all throughout this development.
Brandon, let me interject right there. This is a really important point. WCID does not plan to go into the wholesale business. They want to have one connection. So they will not enter into an agreement where Aqua Texas is kind of owning and operating the system and then asking them to have all the meters. But they will allow a condominium or an apartment or something like that where there's just one entity they're working with, and they kind of wholesale it that way. So this is the only way that they can connect to the sewer system.
And it might add that the sewer system that we're putting in, phase 2 is right adjacent to this, which begins here within the next few weeks. There's within 500 feet of this subdivision. So now you got $63 million sewer system going in, proposed development, and they're 500 feet apart. So,
And I think that's kind of where we're going with this. Why it took us 2 meetings to get to the point where maybe the condominium regime was the perfect fit for this, because we were going to ask for deviations on the development standards. Aqua wanted to own and maintain the water and sewer, and it just started the chips started falling into place here why we were going to put this in a condominium regime.
Now, does this mean there are individual meters or not?
Yes. Individual meters within the subdivision, yes, sir. And then the last bit of water usage and sewer control is that Aqua control drought contingency plan, and that's basically Aqua has the ability to reduce water flow at the meter, and that kind of goes along with Headwaters as well, that they should follow in their lead on that. Development substantiation is basically the 2 items there: is deed restrictions and developer control construction. The deed restrictions obviously will be able to control house size, which then helps us go to how we've come up with the 144 gallons per day for use for single family. Year-round water conservation, that's part of our contingency, is the irrigation. harvesting, rainwater harvesting off of our houses, and we're being able to restrict irrigation to only use the rainwater harvest systems. We'll be able to control and maintenance of all drainage areas, common areas, green spaces, and roadways. And then we will be able to enforce the drought contingency plan based on headwaters restriction plans. And then we will be able to restrict RVs. And what we were finding in our research is to restrict due to age, because a lot more efficiency components get put into the newer RVs that can serve a lot more water, use less water. Tankless water heaters are actually being put into RVs now. If you go to one slide over, I won't read this whole thing. I just have a few highlights. Our vision as a developer, our intent is to provide workforce housing for this area, which you all know that it can be difficult to obtain given land pricing, land topography, off-site development costs, on-site development costs, and unit density. Our goal has been to design a conceptual lot layout that will help mitigate some of those cost issues that have arose that come with the developing this property, and while keeping the prices affordable. And I guess our goal as a developer was to design a development that would meet the current housing needs, as well as our needs as a developer, as well as not burden Kerr County with any financial ask or incentives. And I feel like that's a big one, because we feel like we can do this on our own if we can wrap this up into a condo regime without asking for any aid financially from the county. The last couple pages are some sample houses that we built in New Braunfels, and then one of them, the very last one is more of a modern one, but they're all about the same square footage. These they range in between 1,000 to about 1,600 square feet. We feel like that's our niche for being able to make them affordable. And that's the direction we're going to head. And I do have it's our first version of it. I do have a little flyover. It's a little long. I may get you to speed up through it.
Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, I don't know if it's teed up.
He'll get it there in a second. It's a 3-minute.
Yeah, we don't have to watch the whole 3-minute, and this is preliminary stages, because we'll put houses on there. This is going to be more for our marketing. But this kind of gives you a conceptual of what it looks like, and I wish there was a fast forward button so you could drive a little faster, but I'll try to talk through it and you're more than welcome to ask questions during this time too. But you'll be able to see this is our excuse me, our roadway is coming in. That's our 60-foot right-of-way that we're coming in on. You had a perfect term for that. What did you call that?
Roundabout or traffic calming.
Yeah, traffic calming circle right there, so you're not racing to the back. So you can actually see the lot lines on this little flyover. The topography is actually taken into consideration. There may be a little bit more topography than than what we were probably going to show on this marketing one, but you can kind of see the roadway, how we're going to lay it out. And how it comes back to the north up there.
It's important to say that the topography is as it is.
It is, and it is as it is, which is actually really good for this subdivision. I believe y'all looked at other subdivisions that y'all went down the road with to approve in this area, and a lot of times it gets kicked out due to topography when you're trying to do lot grading. And that typically kicks the budget up quite high, and it's hard to keep the housing affordable at that point. So this is circling around on the north side, and we're about to start facing the south side back towards the river.
Randy, that existing pond that we saw would remain?
Mm-hmm. We want to leave as many existing features as possible, and that's partly why there's 66 acres. 66 acres? Yeah, 66 acres of green space. We feel like that's if you're gonna do high density, you need to have places for people to go to if you're not gonna have huge yards.
Brandon, is the drainage also going through the common areas?
It is, it definitely is, because the way this is shaped, the overall shape of it, so this is one of the streets where the RVs are. The overall shape of it, I use this term, and I don't have a better one, so I'm just gonna say it again, it's kind of shaped like a taco shell. It's high on the outsides and it gets lower in the middle, which affords us to be able to funnel the drainage in an area to where it's not on our lots, it's in our green space area, and it gets it down to the bottom, which is on the southern side where our detention pond will be sitting.
Good job.
It looked to me, when I looked at it, that the drainage already had its own course and that you developed around it.
It is 100% that is true. Our detention pond is going to be exactly where water catches now, except for a lot larger. I'm here to answer any questions. I know Mike with Wellborn Engineering will be able to answer more technical questions than I will. I think that the area needs it, and we're excited to be here. So I hope that's a fit that works for this area.
What, you're building communities like this around the state, you say. Have you done any that you can compare and see that it's worked getting down to the water usage that you're projecting?
We are just now getting into all of ours, and we have not done any research on water usage. So we felt like it was more apt to use water usage from this area on older houses and see how comparable it was to our new houses. And that's why I had my architect actually took our house and ran it through a water use calculator, and it was 92 gallons for 4 people. And so it's a lot more efficient than a traditional house that was built 30, 40 years ago, or a house, just because it's a smaller house, we're limiting how many plumbing lines are in our houses. We have tankless water heaters and things like that minimize how much water goes into the house that's not actually being used. And then limiting, and we've never restricted our irrigation either. So this is a new thing. It is actually becoming pretty popular. Lots of people are doing this now. And so I don't have any actual data from our other subdivisions. We just felt like it was more important to actually pull data from this area. And it was within what we were trying to plan for.
I think that, and Jonathan was there, but I think Keith Marquardt from WCID talked about water usage in the comfort area, which is a high density region also, and the difference in old meters and new meters. It was something like 150 gallons per day on the average that they were using, and then with the new meters is down to
It was a considerable amount.
105. No, actually, what he said was 10 years ago, their system, they had old water meters in there, but they were measuring that folks were using 105 gallons a day at their homes. And now with the new meters, and he's only got like 4% loss now in the system, it's tighter, and they've got lots of people that have moved in that are different living in comfort. Lots more green grass, people watering the grass. Now they're up to about, I think, 145 gallons per day per connection is what they're looking at.
Okay.
The good thing was that comparison that Keith made for us was something that we could grasp our hands on and say, oh, so it's possible for you to propose to build these lots with these small homes and restrict people watering their grasses. Because it's a condo regime, you have total control of that, or the best control you could possibly have, to 144 gallons per day per connection.
Good.
I do want to address one thing, the way it was presented. I want to make sure it's clear because minutes are being taken. Our regulations that talk about the density is completely related to water availability. And those regulations were written 15 years ago, something like that, with the information, the best information we had at that time. It also, so what our regulations state today is that if you're gonna do a development like this in that area, you need to average 2 acres per lot to make sure that you have enough water. And we won't make you do any kind of a water availability study. You will have satisfied our water availability studies by sticking with the 2 acre average. They're gonna go with a little more than a ½ acre average. And it's not just residential, it's RV. And they're being forced to prove up that water, that's how much water that they can use, the 144 gallons per day and the 45 on RV
We
sites.
calculated 45 on the RV sites, and that was questioned, what if, is it a change if people are living there full time? And our research says it doesn't, due to the fact that there's not tubs, nobody's taking a 20-minute shower because the water heaters in an RV are not more than 10 gallons. And then Aqua actually provided us, I think it's a 90-unit-ish, 90-unit RV park that they live full-time in Fredericksburg. And it was actually 37 gallons per unit being used. So we were even conservative on our calculations by using, 8 more gallons or 7 more gallons per day per unit, which when we're getting down to it, every gallon for us matters at this point. So we tried to stick to that little bit of a conservative calculation there.
I just want it to be clear, people are reading the minutes and they're not familiar with the subdivision regulations. It's not a requirement that thou shalt have a 2 acre average period at the end. The regulation is that if you're gonna do something less than 2 acres, you've got more engineering that you have to provide us to make sure that we're comfortable you're gonna have enough water.
Okay.
Charlie, while you're up there,
Yes.
what's your thoughts on the right-of-way going from 90 to 60?
Oh, I don't have a problem with that. I know that the road and the drainage can fit within a 60-foot right-of-way. And I would agree that that is something we do need to look at in our regulations.
90's a lot.
I think the width of 90, if that arterial was to continue past this subdivision into another subdivision and another subdivision, we would start saying, you know what, that 90-foot of right-of-way is starting to be real important to us, because 24-foot of pavement is probably not going to be enough in the future when that next subdivision develops, but that's not what was being proposed here. This would be the end of the road.
Okay.
I think the 90-foot, you have to put a number in rules.
Sure.
And that was kind of based on topography and lots of areas of the county where you need a lot of extra room, because if you only said 60,
Curves and
people are
everything.
going to go to 60. If you say 90, then they have to get a little bit more, especially going up a hill or something like that. So I think that was really, it's more the road specifications than the right-of-way width. As long as the right-of-way, is sufficient and you can get it done.
This lot frontage drops to less than half from 200 feet to 75 feet. Is that going to be?
Talk about that, Charlie.
Okay. That's another, would be very critical to us for the Road and Bridge Department to maintain these roads, to have lots of lot frontage. But going to the condo regime, they're going to maintain their own roads. So if they're going to maintain their own roads and their own drainage, what size frontage do you want? And can you make it work? And they're talking about shared access drives and to limit the number of culverts that go in. And
Especially when you have culverts, trying to do shared
Well,
drives.
it matters only when you have emergency vehicles there, if it's privately maintained. It's not the county's expense, it still matters how you have turnarounds and whether you can get a.
All our turn radiuses meet fire code, yeah.
I think probably the most critical thing on this is that now that it's gone to a condo regime, they're going to actually build those driveways along with the road at the same time. The same contractor that comes in and builds the road is going to put in all those culverts. If it wasn't being done that way, then every one of those driveways would have to be permitted through my office, and you're going to have this house build a culvert this year, this house build a culvert over here next year, 10 of them go over here, and how's the drainage going to work, and where's the mud going to be, and it's going to be just a big nightmare mess. Well, that all went away when they said, we're going to do condo regime.
But there's a
They get to manage that.
there's a single culvert for 2 lots.
Correct.
So they use, so that gives you the 150 feet.
Yes.
I have
Especially
another
when we
question.
have culverts, we're definitely gonna try to do one driveway where a culvert.
Right.
If there's areas where you can do just the sheet flow over them.
Right.
I don't mind a driveway.
Sure.
Multiple driveways, but we wanna limit the culverts.
And also, given the RVs, spaces are smaller lots, we're gonna do that curb and gutter, just, it'll feel like a regular in-city subdivision.
There's a lot of green space here, so you talked about having water catchment for the condos. What's gonna happen to the green space? Is that left alone
It is
naturally?
Native.
Okay. And the catchment will be on each one of these
Yes, sir.
units?
Cody, do you?
One
Oh,
more
I'm
thing
sorry.
before I
I'm sorry.
change. Now, in the headwaters assessment, Gene Williams, the general manager, has 65 gallons per day with the RV size. You mentioned a different number.
45, we're using 45 as, Gene, we had a discussion with Gene. Originally, we're doing another RV site actually here in Kerr County as well. It hasn't been brought to you yet. And the TCQ's regs are in the 40s. I think it's like 42. And talking to Gene, he's like, they've done other RV parks and approved 45 for RV parks. The concern was that now it's permanent, that might be a greater water usage.
Right.
However, our background studies shows that RV is an RV, whether it's here part-time or full-time. And most of the people with RVs are gonna be here if they've got a destination now, they own this lot, but they're still, the RV's concept is still gonna be the same. If they're not here, if they're traveling. And so, but when they're not traveling on vacation, they have a place they call their home and they're parked here. But the RV usage would be 45, and that
And
is
that's,
standard.
they're purchasing these lots.
Correct.
They have the opportunity to, yes.
Or you'll have some for lease or rental.
We will have both unless they all fill out.
Okay, now, I'm interested in the idea that you would restrict them by age of the unit. Is that,
Yeah, and we're doing more research on it. We were told that was one way to ensure the most efficient RV plumbing systems we're in. We're gonna have to probably get detailed with that because I know right now it is a popular thing to take old Airstreams and redo them and put new plumbing parts and new. So
that's all I wanted to hear.
So there may be some clause in there that's retrofitted or it's gonna have to be proven somehow. But you know, for this purposes, I was more talking about the newer RVs just for that purposes for more efficient plumbing systems in it.
Okay. Don't want to get discriminatory.
Yeah. They're actually really cool, the retro ones.
Cody Newsom,
Okay,
superintendent of schools, got,
I've got you. Go ahead.
All right,
I didn't know if you felt
I
like.
just want to make a couple of comments and be here mainly to answer questions also. Everybody's been nice enough to include me on some of the meetings, so I know what's going on. A huge issue for us, and has been, the board's talked about this for 100 years, is teacher housing. Affordable housing in Center Point is a fallacy. I've had people come up and say, well, Center Point's a lot cheaper to live in. It's not. Look on Realtor.com, 1.2 million, 2.1 million houses that people in this room would live in are not affordable for some people. So we've had instances, I've got teachers driving in from San Antonio, and we get into a situation, we train them up, they drive in, and then when they get a job closer to home, they go closer to home. So teacher housing is a huge issue for us. The school owns one rent house that the kids built years ago. It's never been empty. It's been full since I've been there, and I've been superintendent there for 12 years. So it's a definite need. Just another comment, industry. Our school district runs all the way up to Mooney. So we had James Avery come in, is in Center Point ISD. Killdeer's coming to Center Point ISD. I know Commissioner Mosner has told me there's a few other things in the works possibly coming to that area. So it just seems like a fit to have that housing development in somewhere around those industry areas. Tax rate, just so you'll know, we have the lowest tax rate in Kerr County, Center Point ISD does. Also, 2 weeks ago at a board meeting, we just moved $1.5 million to our INS fund to pay off all indebtedness. So we'll be debt free And we also have the lowest tax rate, which makes it a pretty popular place for affordable housing and people to move into that need that luxury. And just as a side note, we've got room to grow in our current school district. Automatically, people are going to jump out and think of the four-letter word in school as bond. And so this is not going to be a burden at this time on any kind of taxpayers. We've got, actually my enrollment right now, of course, we take into consideration the COVID crisis. I'm down to about 537 students. My high since I've been there has been 640. So we've got room to grow in our current facilities. I have no idea what a development would bring student-wise, but even this year I'm down 60 kids. So, and with that, that's just a few statement of facts, and I'm here to answer any questions and concerns or information as far as the school is concerned.
Good, thanks, Gary.
I have a question, Brandon or Mike, one of you two. When I'm looking at all the numbers and all that, y'all are getting very close to the maximum that Headwaters is going to allow. When you take into account combining, and then you lose a little bit of water because there's excess being used in Center Point North. That you're so close that you really don't allow for the drought contingency numbers.
The 10% that possibly Gene mentioned.
Yeah.
So what we discussed is Gene's numbers had correct me if I'm wrong, this was kind of what happened at the end. Gene's numbers had 65 gallons per the RVs, and there's no data showing that. And so with us figuring it at 45, that gives us over the 10% savings on the water that based on Gene's calculations. I think that was I'm gonna round up. I think it was about 11 million.
Yeah, actually,
Eight and two.
45, it was 10 million, it was about 10,800,000, so
Those
it
are
was
our
actually
calculations,
just
so.
right about 10% from the maximum that would be.
Tell me what you mean, 10,800 gallons per year for the development.
Correct.
Development.
So 100, if we round it to 150, it's 12 million gallons.
Yeah.
149.5, it's in his report, so like 11,800,000, something like that. We're at 10,800,000, assuming full peak flow conditions.
And I guess in case somebody's questioning that, the 80,000 gallons per acre per year equals for our subdivision right at 12 million gallons per year. So the question was asked, how are we getting our 10% savings for a bad year? And Gene's calculations with using a higher RV calculation we had plenty, but we were at the threshold, but our calculations show, and we were able to prove up actual uses, current uses, is actually about 10% less. So it goes from about 11.8 million to about 10.8 million.
What do you, because of the nature of the development, you're pretty much limiting the households to personal water use.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to further drought restrictions, you hit 20 and possibly 30% reductions. How can, as a condominium, you control usage when there's really nothing to cut? The normal way to cut it is
Irrigation.
lawn watering, car washing, all that stuff. All those are off the table. But these people don't have that ability. So how do you cut it further and allow people to function?
You have any?
Well, I would say on this is that this subdivision be run basically under stage 1 water restrictions all the time. And so it's self-imposed water restricted in the deeds for this subdivision with the rain catchment, washing cars so that it doesn't spray off into the street. So we're already setting it up to be in a stage 1.
But I guess I'm worried about stage 2 and 3.
Yeah, there's no wiggle room from your starting point.
Yeah, well, what Joseph said is like if we have somebody that's using more water than they're allowed to, even under a stage conditions, they have the option to go and restrict that. And they can go put in a washer that actually necks down the diameter of the water system, the flow into the house, and can reduce it that way.
At the meter.
Right.
And that was one of the drought restriction contingencies that we talked about on one of the pages. I think it was on the 4th page where it said, Aqua Control Drought Contingency Plan is Aqua has the ability to reduce the water flow at the meter to help get to that point. And I do not know what that looks like. I was told it's a washer that goes in the water line that reduces the diameter of flow. Is that pretty accurate? Yes.
This, kind of a general comment, and I don't know the details of TCQ rules, but I know Joseph probably does. They're obligated to provide the water. I mean, if it starts getting to a point that they need to go buy acreage, drill a well, they're obligated by TCQ to provide the water.
That's in somebody's CCN.
Yeah, well, it's in CCN. It will be in a CCN.
Yeah.
And Aqua Texas has, I don't know how many systems are in that center point area. So there's an obligation that they have, and they're operating because these lot sizes under our model subdivision rules, where basically for water availability, what they need to provide to us is a letter from Aqua that they have water for 30 years.
So you're saying,
So that meets the rule. I mean, the 2 acre is a number that we use, headwater, we use it based on headwaters, but under the model rules, which is what really they operate under here, all we require, or all the state requires for water availability is for Aqua Texas to say they got the water. Am I saying that basically correct, Charlie?
yes,
Yes.
it's 30 years right now. So are you saying Aquatex drills the well? Who are you saying drills the
They
well?
drill it. They're responsible for the water. Now, they have to work with headwaters, and it's a kind of a three-legged stool. TCQ says,
Yeah.
here's the rules. Headwaters says this is how much you get based on your acreage.
Would you care to say anything at all?
I'm gonna leave it to Gene's letter. Tom may
okay.
want to.
Huh?
No, I just think it's cutting it really close on the permit, and I think y'all done an awesome job, by the way, trying to show what you're doing, but you're not allowing for an age system either. At some point, it will be an age system. And so you do have to look at those losses that you're gonna have over time. Aqua's permit for the 74 acres that you already have existing exceeds the initial permit that's allowed already. By 100,000 or something a year annually over a 17-year average, which is not a major crisis, but it is going to become an age system at some point. And you are going to have a deficiency there in your water. You're going to have a larger loss than what's originally calculated in the new subdivision. So being really close to the permit is pretty scary. And whenever, Jonathan, when you were talking earlier about this is the beginning of others to come, and I'm all for growth, and I know that area needs it desperately, affordable housing, no question. But that area is one of the first ones to hit drought. There's no water there.
There's less water.
Less water.
Yeah, right.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
I stand corrected.
Yeah, right.
I stand corrected.
And that's not,
Just a concern.
Yeah, it's a concern, and that's, I'm very much in favor of the development. I am concerned about how close they are to the maximum amount of water being used, and it would be, there's a way to reduce the number of lots and/or RV spots by like 5%.
Well,
That would give you-
another thing that we have calculated in there are washateria, and we wanted to calculate that in there just in case, and that is a huge undertaking to add that. And right now, we're not necessarily said that that's what we have to do. We have been told in Center Point that there may be something that's coming along with the storage facility that can accommodate something like that, but then that gives us, I think we calculated with 300 gallons a day, for 365 days out of the year. So that is a huge gain of water capacity we would get back to if we don't do that. So, we're given the parameters of what we're allowed, and that we're trying to design a subdivision that is actually, we try to be conservative with our numbers, and we feel like we're 10% under what was actually allowed to us, And so I feel like this is a good fit, and I feel like we've done the design concept. I do know when you're developing your land, 20, 30 years ago, when you talk about age systems, they were laid straight in a trench on rock, and shifting. And now you have all the bedding rules and all that kind of stuff that you have to go through. And I do think pipe running at longer foot joints without as many intersections in it, it is a much more efficient system that you do eliminate a lot more loss. Did I say that right? Eliminate a lot more loss.
Now, tell me about the landscaping. I know you're gonna catch water for it, but you're not gonna put St. Augustine grass or something?
No, we're not putting any grass in. We've actually
Xeriscape.
researched actually putting turf in perimeter, like the perimeter around the perimeter of the houses. And that helps. And I'm starting to look at that in commercial settings too. It's a permeable solution to areas. It actually helps with erosion control. I don't have to water it. So I don't necessarily want to say that's what we're doing yet, because we got to look and see. I don't necessarily want to do it if it adds 10 grand to each one of these houses, because then that starts getting me to the unaffordable if I do that twice within this. So we are looking at other options too. I'm not looking just for houses in a barren land there in a drought year, but I'm not oblivious to the fact that people aren't going to have plants and possibly a flower bed around their house that they can run with a drip irrigation off of their rainwater collection.
This whole county is gonna have to look at Xeriscape someday,
Yeah.
just like Arizona. 'Cause-
Well, there's a lot of cities that don't even let you put St. Augustine
Right.
in cities anymore.
And they should.
So, and so I think it's a concept that's being discussed everywhere on how to do it.
So that's your plan now, is Xeriscape.
Mhm.
The reason I ask is because if you don't have to water anything, but you're catching water, you have emergency water.
You do, and so Hayes County, the new jail cell there that was built, they did rainwater collection, and they have a float switch on their deal and a bypass valve to where if they get into a situation, they can actually use their rainwater for their building if they needed to. Obviously, that would be a limited amount of water because they didn't design their rainwater collection based off of no water other sources. But so there are scenarios there that you can also do that too, where you can plumb back into your living quarters supply.
Rain.
Brandon?
Right.
What is that?
Rain?
Well, yeah, it won't be
You read
full.
about it, right?
Look, you have condensation on the roof all year
Yeah, that's
long.
exactly right. You condensate.
And
That's
it
exactly
collects
right.
more than you realize. It does.
Yeah, that
It's a euphemism to call it a rain collection.
Yeah, correct.
It's a water collection.
Correct.
It's a water harvesting.
Yeah, it's hard to do the calculation when you're looking at the annual year waterfall, rainfall, and I can get this many gallons off the shed, and then but it hadn't rained in 4 weeks, and yeah.
That's right.
Brandon, we're getting into areas I know lots of them, probably hunt this to the county attorney in a second. Condominiums are regulated by, I think, the Uniform Condominium Act of Texas, when there's something similar to that. Anyways, regulated by the state. So it's sort of like an HOA, but it's independent or it's different. Generally, we don't get involved with HOA. Generally, we just don't get involved with HOAs, county level. So I presume we don't get involved with condominium rules at the county level either. How your water availability is based on very strict rules in your condominium. How are we guaranteed that those aren't going to be changed, since we have no control over those?
Meaning, once y'all approve, we change it.
How do we know that like an HOA, they change their rules all the time?
Sure.
So you're saying if the uniform condo rules change, we have no control over that?
Right, and it's done by the association, I would think. So, we need to be comfortable that the rules that are set have to be followed, because your entire water availability issue is based on the condominium rules.
Other than condominium regime has, and I'm not a lawyer, but I know we have a whole lot more enforceability within the regime. And I do know, there are things that we have to do within development agreements in cities, and when we, we'll concede to something if the city gives us something in return, and that has to be recorded. So maybe there is some items that we will, adhere to what our numbers are that we have and our design standards that we have today, that they can be recorded. I don't, you may be able to answer something more than that. That's about all I know.
I don't know anything about condominiums, so I'd have to learn a little bit in order to give you some advice.
I do. I've been a real estate lawyer for 45 years, and I have personal and professional experience with condominium regimes for the last 20, and I'm still learning. It's a long learning curve. One of the big differences is that the condominium regimes do not have the Consumer Bill of Rights that the HOAs have, which means that it is pretty much dictated by the condominium ownership, the regime ownership. And I have yet to be involved with a condominium regime that has not resulted in extensive litigation. Just letting you know.
The more units, the more litigation.
It's much more problematic because it is not traditional. It's new. These are new ideas, and I will tell you that I've gotten increasingly comfortable with condominium regimes over the last 20 years. But it's taken a while, and a lot of it depends on the judgment and wisdom and common sense of the ownership and the leadership of that regime. Because it can be extremely oppressive, and if it becomes oppressive, especially when you're restricting people's ability to access water, you can expect to see the courts flooded with requests to sort through the issues. I'm all in favor of embarking on this, but this is going to be to me, a cataclysmic change in the way we do business in the county, and not something to be entered into lightly, but with careful examination and getting us familiar with this and being able to work with this type of regime. It is the future. I agree with that. I love to see aggressive young businessmen come in with these ideas. This is wonderful. But at the same time, we have to be careful in how we approach it. I was talking with somebody earlier this morning that I am conservative. I am very conservative. And these new ideas are wonderful, and we need to investigate them. We need to flesh them out. But at the same time, we need to take the time to learn how this is going to impact us. The first condominium regime that I had experience with personally was on the East Coast, and let me tell you, they're very refined and perfected there. And it was like, if you think going to City Hall is tough, wait till you go to a condominium regime. It is another world. But it's all good, and I'm excited about it. I just want to go slowly and carefully and try to do this the prudent way. My big concern is that I'm looking around this room, and we've got, a dozen highly motivated, very informed people here talking to us about a change in the way we're going to house people in our county. And I'm excited. If I had half the county with your collective wisdom, I would be behind this 100%. And it's not that I'm not behind it. I'm just slow to make this move because this is going to be a cataclysmic change in the way we house people in this county.
I think historically, condominium regimes, when you talk about ending in litigation, I would bet most of the litigation came from in the past was paint-to-paint condominium regimes where you're actually sharing walls, and so basically your litigation is over airspace at that point. And I'm dumbing that down quite a bit.
And I'm happy to explain. The litigation that I've seen comes when somebody in a position of authority is telling other people what they can do with the property that they purchased. People don't like to be told what to do. When they buy it, they think they have certain rights. And what I'm telling you is when they buy it in the condominium regime, they don't have many rights at all. The people that have the rights will be you and the people that own that regime.
And the attorneys we're working with drawing up our condominium regimes are very upfront with when you have a potential buyer that coming and looking at this property, the first thing you show them is the condominium regime. and they have to sign that they received the condominium regime, because of such instances, and you have that in HOAs too.
And you know what? They do that every time. You cannot go to that title company and close on that property without signing that form.
I know.
But they don't read it, and if they read it, they don't understand it until the issues come up. And when you start cutting off people's water, let me tell you,
Sure.
we're gonna hear it. This courthouse is gonna be filled with people protesting their water being cut off.
I'd hate to have that job going around the neighborhood putting that little washer in there to reduce their flow.
Target on your back.
Second Amendment right, gun rights.
2 a.m.
I will note that we have one other condominium regime in the county, Staplewood Springs. Hardly that's twice.
It's an alarm that I don't know how to turn off. It's not even a phone call.
You call power, turn the damn thing off.
But Staplewood was done this way for a different reason, and it's not a particularly high density development, but it is a condominium,
And that condominium regime is after 4 failed real estate developments.
right.
That we resorted to that to try to do something out there to save that subdivision. And whether or not we're there yet or not, I don't know.
Yeah, it switched probably 5 years ago. But like I said, it seems to be going okay, but it's very different than this one. And it was done well. No reason to go into all that part of it. A lot of it was because of wastewater,
Well,
septic tanks.
the agenda item here is to look at the concept and approve the concept. So, question, if we approve a concept, that lets the developer proceed with providing the more definition needs, then to come back and I'm asking this as a question, then is a approved subdivision.
Condominiums are different.
Okay.
Not a subdivision.
So that's the reason I bring it up. Exactly, if we were to say, yea, verily, we approve of the concept, we understand the low margin on things, but to proceed, then what does that mean, and what do they do to come back to the county?
I think it was, as it relates to our subdivision rules, it said our rules say, condominiums and planned developments have to meet our standards. But because we never really had an issue, it's about all it says.
Mhm.
So, road standards, meeting the road standards, right away, it can be modified because of the,
Right.
reason we talked about. But when it comes to, I'm not really sure what this step is. Is there a final plat, Charlie? I guess
There's a plat that they produce. And, I think really that the big, Mike, you wanna go?
Well, yeah, well, tell me if I'm just talking about it. So like we did a mobile home park, we've done a couple, bringing another one in here. It's not a plat, but feels like a plat. And it actually gets filed, right? Because we filed those. But it's instead of filed under the plat of records, it's filed kind of as a condominium of records. It's something separate. It looks like.
It's gonna be a kissing cousin to, just like what we have out at Meadowbrook, was it Meadowbrook?
Meadowbrook.
Yes.
The train wreck we've got out in West Kerr County.
I didn't do that one, so.
I understand that, I appreciate that. But it's not that there's anything wrong that's being done with regard to the development. It's that the public did not understand what was going in out there, and we have had a veritable train wreck in this courtroom over that. And a lot of it has to do with adjacent landowners, and we haven't talked about adjacent landowners.
Well, and what we're offering here, whether there's a mechanism for it or not, what we would propose is treat it just like a normal, regular subdivision. We provide you the detailed construction plans, the water, the sewer layout, the details for the road, the subgrade, the drainage, the stormwater detention pond. And we would do it just like we were doing a normal, regular subdivision. Bring that in for court's approval, work with Charlie on the plans. Bring you a plat, whether it's filed under the subdivision regulations or something separately. We want to treat it as exactly the same and bring that to the court for approval. So we're not trying to, we want you to be involved and not excluded.
So does that make sense to you, county attorney?
It does.
Yeah, okay. All right. So that's what I was trying to bring,
But
have us
make
bring
no
out.
mistake, it's
If
not
we
the
approve
first time.
something today, then what is the next step in the approval process by the county?
We have to prove up our engineering.
Correct.
But if this is not an accepted path, then there's no reason for us to prove up
Sure.
engineering.
Right.
Is it being done in phases?
It will be done in phases.
And so this part, I noticed looking at it, well, just, and what will come first and what will be the following?
That's still to be decided because we know we have to get to the backside where there's wells being put. And so, you know, overall cost of that, how many lots do we put in the first phase to try to mitigate the upfront costs? You know, those are things that we have to get into when we start looking at our costs that we're getting into.
But you're not gonna go in and work your way out.
No, we're gonna go in and work our way back, most likely.
That's a lot of wear and tear on that new road. So feasibly, you could take any section of this and just do a portion of it.
You know, we have to put the main road in. I mean,
Well, I don't mean that. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you have to do that. But I'm talking about, say here, for example, and then finish this out.
That's a logical phase one, is that first one that you're talking about. We know we have to get to that main circle there, for that's where the well and the tanks will be. But how many lots come off of that? That first one that you just showed is the most logical, phase one.
How, and I know it's going to depend on sales, what would you anticipate a build out being? For phase one, you know.
So the market data that we're getting for buyers is 2 years.
To build the entire thing? I mean, an
Now,
option.
obviously, there's lots of things
Right.
that can dictate the different change of that. Another year of shutdowns. Although I think this product is actually providing a more stimulus for this product. So I don't see change of that, but that's kind of what we've been given for our marketing.
And just tossing out an idea, if it's done in phases, if a reduction in the footprint to half the number of lots, both RV and the other, are done in phase one, and then once it's built, if everything is working on the water side, then the decision on the density, the remaining density would be done at that point, at the.
So you're telling me that I'm going into it blind with not knowing my density?
No.
That's hard for me.
But there could be a potential reduction in the number of the final phase. I mean, if your numbers are coming in that, yeah, you're using, 120 to 130 gallons per unit, that's one thing, but if it comes in and using 180, that's real problematic because you're very close to the cap right now already.
Let me comment. That was the one reason to get the data on the 91 properties that are in close proximity.
Mm-hmm.
Larger lots, lots of green space around them, lots of stuff to water that's there. So that's a data point for that area.
But they know the total number of water the amount they're gonna have.
Yeah.
I mean, they know the.
Right.
We do currently based off our numbers.
Right, and if there's so if you're confident enough that your numbers are accurate on the water use, then there's really no risk. If that turns out to be the actual number, because you're gonna get that number of lots, because that's how much water you have.
So what you're telling me it's contingent? Is that what my density is contingent?
On them using that water, yeah.
So are you saying that you're gonna, what you're proposing is a 10% less reduction of lots in moving forward of our first phases, and then we're supposed to report back gallon uses?
I'll tell you, I'm just
trying to make sure I understand what you're.
Something along that line, something to show that there is a mechanism to reduce the total number of lots by 10% on phase two if it's needed.
Well, let me
Isn't that
suggest
kind of what we've done by taking historical data over 12 different systems?
There's a lot of different, Headwaters has different numbers than you all do, a little bit.
But Headwaters is the one that sent us the 144 gallons per unit.
But they have a different number on the RV.
there's no proven stuff. TCQ's number is actually 40, and we agreed to 45.
Aren't those conversations that really need to take place with Headwaters? It seems, I mean, you bring in a concept to us. It's a brand-new concept for this county. It's gonna set precedent what we're gonna do with our $60 million investment in the East Kerr County wastewater line that goes all the way to Comfort. And this is going to be an example of what we can look forward to. I would be more comfortable if we took our time and we had public meetings and we get the public educated on this and get this court educated so that we're comfortable. This is the development model that we want to use. I understand that for affordable housing, Brandon, we're going to have to do something like this because it's just not going to happen otherwise. The dirt and the rocks in Kerr County are just too expensive. Now, with that said, my approach would be not to break it up into bite-sized pieces like this, but to take this slowly, deliberately. Let's bring it in and get the public on board and work with all of our other agencies such as Headwater to make sure that we are meeting the public need in this. I mean, we need the workforce housing, but do we just run in and slap it on the ground before we're comfortable that this is the way the county wants to move in this direction and this is how we're going to do it?
Well, I guess that in my opinion, that's what we've been doing over the last 2.5 months is meeting with Headwaters.
But I'm hearing about it for the first time today,
Okay.
and I'm one of the more experienced people with this type of thing on the court, and the public hasn't heard about it at all. We haven't even gotten out to the public, and we saw what happened when the public finds out about things after the fact. It's not pretty. And so my suggestion is that we do this deliberately and slowly. This is a little bit like Starship Enterprise. We're going where no one in Kerr County has ever gone before, and we need to do it deliberately and carefully and build consensus before we get there.
Well, Judge,
That's where I'm coming from.
let me comment. We have worked at this, okay? We've spent hours on it with everybody involved. We obviously can't have everybody in the court in that session because of open meeting rules. So we've looked at it, Jonathan, myself, the county engineer, and we started, I mean, during these discussions, it's been in detail challenges on all this stuff. We said, what is Centerpoint? What's the data there? Aqua Texas, tell us everything that you've got there. We've had Headwaters groundwater involved in it extensively. We've got cold hard data from 90 properties in Centerpoint. I mean, that's real data, okay? In proximity, using the same types of water. Larger properties than what's being proposed here. I think the thing that everybody's mentioning over in Precinct 4 had to do with flooding, okay? And what are you doing to control flooding? That was an issue because people had historical data on what the flooding was in their fields and their hay pastures and so forth. This is different than that. This is, I don't know, I don't know what they're, and I'll let Brandon talk to this, of what the timing need is on his acquisition of the property and closing the deal with that. But also, if you look at, you got existing data, we've got something here that's different, okay? If it works fine, I think we've got the margin that's in there, okay? It's already been talked about. It's not to say if it's at the edge of the margin and we're pushing the envelope there, it's not to say that we can not approve if other condominium challenges come in or proposals come in, other condominium concepts, say, no, we're not going to do it, okay? We've learned from existing, we've learned from this, or we may say, this works great, okay? And then consider the next condominium project if it's proposed. I don't see the benefit personally and I don't understand the impact if we let the thing be put off until we approve the concept.
Well, I think I'm not sure exactly what the judge means by slow down. I mean, if we say the concept is okay,
Right.
But we'd like to have a public meeting on it,
Sure, no
that's
problem with
fine. But this is slow it down. This thing has been looked at a lot.
that. Yeah.
By 3 dozen people, not by the rest of us.
Well, That's
this
why
is
we're-
my
that's-
this is my first exposure to it.
Right, that's why we're here today.
And
But,
that's right. And so this is step one of a number of steps that I think ought to be taken to get us there.
but Steph, if he goes and changes this to a subdivision, we have 30 days.
I understand.
So, to me, we have 30 days to make a decision on this. I mean, it's the same thing. And we can do a public
No,
meeting.
a condominium regime is not the same thing as subdivision, just like Mike was saying. If we treat this like a subdivision, we know exactly what the rules are, we know exactly what our subdivision rules are, we know what our timetables are, and the public is on notice of that.
And then we'll
This
have
is
no-
something new.
Yeah, Judge, but if we do that, strictly by our rules, we'll never have workforce development in this county, period.
Period.
Because our rules don't allow for it, because we didn't have wastewater until now. So, I mean, I think this slowing it down doesn't make sense. We need to tackle the issue. We've been talking about a lot of these issues for 2 years. That we need to figure out how to allow for density development in this area where there's now wastewater available.
And
I don't
would
see
like
what
that-
slowing it down does.
It gets input from the public. Right now, we're getting input from the would-be developers that want to come in here and do this. And I understand it. I love the aggressive business approach. I do. I truly do. I embrace that. But it's the kind of thing that it needs to be tried and true. The public needs to be invested in this. These other regulatory agencies need to be invested in this. We're getting ready to embark upon a condominium regime that we're going to have to incorporate into our subdivision rules on one project. And that becomes the precedent for the future.
What
And I think the public
regulatory-
deserves to be heard.
Other regulatory things, we got headwater, groundwater here, we got WCID here, okay? I think we meet their requirements.
I talked to Gene Williams and I questioned that. I think we're on the
What do
borderline.
you question?
The water capacity.
We just went through it, Judge.
Okay, yell at me, that's fine.
I'm not yelling at
water's
you, I'm
the
just
big
saying,
issue.
I don't know what else we
I'm
do.
gonna call the issue. Let's take a vote. Is there a motion
I'll
on the
make a
floor?
motion that we approve the concept as presented, okay, for Eden Farms and Center Point.
Okay.
I don't know if I want to prove it as presented. I want to look at it more. But I think we need to move forward. I think we ought to have a plan.
Isn't that what the judge just said?
Yeah, but the judges, I think 30 days is enough. And I mean, there's going to be, if they're going to do a plat, how long does it take you to do a plat, Brandon?
Well, let me back up. We can do a plat,
Well,
I can do a plat with that now. However, a condominium doesn't require a plat. What I'm saying is, basically, this is, if we're gonna do this as a normal subdivision, this right here would be considered a preliminary plat. And so basically what we're asking for is approval of preliminary plat today. However, being a condominium regime, it doesn't require a preliminary plat, it doesn't require a final plat. What we are doing is requesting approval on the concept plan so that we can move forward from starting today with the detailed construction plans and whatever the court decides is needed for a condominium regime.
You know, I'm gonna speak a little bit on a subdivision that I'm not personally working on, but a friend of mine is, and they're in Leander. They took 48 acres and platted it as one condominium lot. The city of Leander, who is extremely difficult to develop within, what they did is gave two conditions. We'll grant you that one condominium lot. Main purpose was because they were looking for density that was not within their development standards. So they didn't want to rewrite their development standards to adhere to this density. So they were happy with the condominium, but they gave them, they wanted, if you're going to do this small lots, we want a rear entry. And there was one more about cul-de-sac widths for fire, because the fire was getting a larger truck that they had to do a big turnout. So currently, it is platted and filed as one condominium lot, and they can overlay their land plan on top of it, and it's not a plat. One platted lot is current, and then the condominium regime that is actually submitted and recorded is actually the governing body that dictates all of the innards of lot layouts and stuff like that.
We've got a motion, do we have a second?
What was the motion?
to approve.
approve the
concept.
concept.
To approve concept, just.
As presented.
As presented.
I think, Leandra, I'm not really just willing to second it right now. And the reason is, I don't see that this is I don't disagree with the judge that this needs to be looked at by the public or a small group that looked at it. And I don't want to tell the developer to go spend a lot of money until we have at least some period of time, which to me would be maybe 2 weeks, and bring it back at our next meeting to approve it. So everyone has had a little bit of time to look at it. Because
Okay.
3 members of the court, I acknowledge, have not, this is the first time they've looked at it. And I think that there is, the reason it was brought today was to bring everyone up to speed as to where we are. And I think that, and during that period, I don't know, schedule a meeting maybe in Center Point if they want to, or just have, obviously the school district is very much in favor of this project for a lot of reasons. My preference would be to hold off and maybe put this on the agenda on the 25th. That's a week, 2 weeks, 2 weeks.
10 days.
10 days. Either that or the first meeting in February for the approval. I just hate to, I don't want them to start spending money if there's any.
What does that mean to,
I have to make a decision by the end of February.
by the end of February? So that's compatible with your decision, okay. All right.
What do we think will determine by
I think-
putting it off?
I think it's more public awareness.
Okay.
Okay.
I think I'm still a little concerned with the water. I know you're pretty close. I'd like to look at the numbers. The water usage is documented by Aqua Texas and WCID as to what is actually being used, though the numbers are a lot less than I'm used to attributing to residential water.
Okay, well, I'll withdraw my motion in light of the fact that end of February is when you need to make that decision. I thought it was sooner than that. And then we'll put it on the agenda for the 25th.
Apologize. Could we get them, I think, I talked with Brandon in the hallway, and he didn't have it with him today, but he was gonna get more information to me about the water and how much was calculated that was actually gonna be used in these homes. I have not seen that number yet, that schedule, and I've been kind of chomping at the bit for that. If I could get that, then I could, right now, I can't tell y'all what I think about the water, other than I know it's tight. That's
my
all I
main
can
concern.
say. And I just wish if I just had those numbers, I could take it to that next step where I could quantify it for you and tell you, okay, here's the percentages. And then I think you would be able to feel more comfortable making a decision.
That would help me a lot.
And the other thing I think would be helpful, Joseph, I know you need some stuff to do, you're not real busy these days, but
Yeah.
if you could pick, you're the water provider for most systems in the county, come up with Center Point North, a few others around Center Point, and just put a little chart together of per connection, how much water is being used on average. I know you've done it already, but I mean, just have a chart. I mean, I'd like to see a chart. Here's the development or the CCN, here's how many, or the water system as you call it. Anyway, but put that together as a chart so we can see, what WCID says they're using, what Center Point North is using, all the rest of it.
I think it's there, but that'll be.
Yeah, it's there, but I think it wasn't in the presentation. I think that's a really important.
The other thing I'd like to see is, I know that there are people that are households that are using water just for personal use that are on rainwater catchment systems. And I know there's some data there. I think it'd be interesting to see when they're being careful on their water usage, exactly what that is. But I think it's another data point that is available.
You always plan for the bad years. And
Yeah. No, I'm just talking about if somebody has the philosophy, we're gonna really be careful about the water we use, what do they really use? Okay? I think there's not many people, but I think there's some in the area that do that. That'd be good.
From my time on Headwater Board, what I recall is any of these areas that had dense population, the usage was typically right at or below what they had applied for, unless we found out there was a leak or something like that. Do either you guys have anything to say about applied for usage versus what people, I know sometimes they have a second edition or something, they come back and apply for more, but in general, do people stay, because these guys are wanting to stay on target, generally speaking, in a high-density neighborhood or trailer park or whatever it may be, how often are they close to their number? And how close?
Some are and some aren't, but we like to have it to where they have that cushion built in for the 20% or 30% reduction.
Which is, you're really talking about a comfort zone, but I'm talking about, really getting pretty close to the mark.
All over the map.
Yeah. But a lot of times it's, there's a lot of variables, I realize that. But can you think of anything that would be a close comparison to this?
Not to what they're proposing.
Now, this one is cut to the bone. It's cut to the bone, but also the restriction of outdoor watering is the key component to this. I mean, that's the only way that they're getting close.
Was it WCID that told us that if you cut outside irrigation, it'll cut their usage by a third? And that's a third off of, what number? Was it the 145 or was that?
That's a higher number. So.
Yeah.
Well, just to kind of wrap up today, this has been very productive, and I want to say to you, Brandon and Mike, we are excited about these new ideas that you're coming to us with. They're new to Kerr County. I've had experience with them other places, but this is an exciting opportunity for us, and we want to cooperate and work with you to find a way to make this happen. What we're doing today is because we are conservative, we're a conservative county, and I happen to be very conservative myself. We're tapping the brakes. We want to make sure we get this right. And let's go forward. We'll have you on the agenda for the 25th. Let's start looking for ways that we can get everybody up to speed to know how we can go about developing residential opportunities for people in the county with this new condominium regime concept. So thank you very much for coming in.
Well, with that, and thank you, Judge, I agree with that 100%. So should we have to make sure the public gets exposure to this, should we have a workshop between now and then to invite the public in? What would you,
I think workshops are good. I think town hall meetings like we're having later in the month in Precinct 2 are good. The more opportunities we have for the public to come and listen to what we're talking about. This is a very woke group. You people are awakened to the opportunities and the challenges lying ahead for us in developing affordable housing in this county. Not everybody's up to your standard. We need to get more people comfortable with what we're doing so that we don't have the pushback that we've had on some of our other projects where the public was not really aware of what was happening. We had a public hearing, but they didn't find out about it until afterward, and it blew up in our face. So this is just trying to prevent all that and keep this on a steady track moving forward.
well, with that, I'll try and, if the court agrees, I'll set up a town hall meeting, okay, between now and the next Commissioners Court on the 25th, and try to do it at the Ag Barn where we can have lots of space. And when
It's going to be pushed between now and the 25th at the Ag Barn, I can tell you that.
Yeah, stock show.
oh, that's
Stock show
right.
starts tomorrow.
Okay.
Let's see if
Yeah.
Cody maybe can.
Well, we could do it perhaps at the
We can do it at the
cafeteria.
Be glad to host that.
Okay. So let me work with Cody and with Brandon and Mike and Charlie and everybody to have a town hall meeting in Center Point. Is that okay? Go ahead.
Question. So just so I can try to understand the process. So we're going to have a regular scheduled Commissioners Court meeting on the 25th or 26th? 25th. Okay. On the 25th. After that meeting, would that be basically the approval of, even though this isn't a preliminary plat, that would give us vested rights to then move forward and go through the developments?
I don't know. It just depends.
I mean, it would be.
We're all trying to get up to speed on this at the same time. We just have a bigger audience that we need to fold in to understand what we're doing.
And I guess my question is, what is our homework between now and then? What are we needing to come back with you for? Is it merely, I understand that part, but is it merely to educate the public, or do I need to create a different presentation, or?
Well, I think we need you to work with Headwaters. I know that. Because this is pushing the
Well, that's
limit
what
right
we've been
now.
doing, and we got a letter from Headwaters. So I don't know what else we need to do with Headwaters. And I get the conservative nature of it.
Well, Chris is here. What do we need to do, Chris?
You know, Gene had been in that, we've had, 3 meetings with Gene. He wrote you the letter this week. We were sort of anticipating y'all would have come into our office this week.
Okay.
We didn't get that. I think I mentioned it to somebody else here.
Okay.
So, if you
Okay.
were gonna contest the 65 gallons on the RV connections, probably would have been,
Got you.
Okay.
And by the time you talk to the public, and this is worked out, you'll have a much better case to make for any objections that may come up. And there's always gonna be somebody that doesn't want you to go there because they don't want you to cut down a mesquite tree
Yep.
that their grandfather did. But you're gonna have a pretty solid presentation here. Everybody knows the need. You get those details worked out like that, I think you ought to be okay.
I think we can continue that conversation after today. You can continue out in the hallway. I apologize, we're running past the time that I need to be somewhere. There being no other business before the court, we will be adjourned. Please continue your discussion.
Your drive, man, you just want to see your